we're talking about trying to get this into our whole entire life, not just, like I said, just on the surface, the part that we often like to present to other people. All right, this massive, but the human personality is more like deep waters, like it says in the book of Proverbs. And so we want to just challenge you to make the shift to go deeper today. So Lord, by the power of your Spirit, would you let us go deeper today, God? Would you let us go deeper, Lord, into this territory right here, beneath the surface, God, to see today, Lord. It goes in line with what Rich was saying today in preaching. Lord, help us really see. Help us see ourselves. And so, Lord, I pray that you're gonna do that today. So if we could just take a minute of silence before we start in the nature of EHD. And so I'll set a timer. Like it says in the celebration of discipline, meditation is basically, Eastern meditation is the idea of emptying ourselves, okay? Christian meditation is the idea of emptying ourselves, but to fill ourselves with Jesus, right? Okay, so it's completely different. So while we're just quiet, you can just simply use a phrase, Jesus, Abba, Papa, Daddy, whatever you like to do, or any type of phrase, and to just get your mind, if it starts racing, back to just sitting in God's love and the love of the Father. So I'm just going to set a timer here for 1 minute, and we'll start with 1 minute of silence here. So as I was getting ready to start this lesson this week, God just kept stopping me again and again and again, repeatedly, and so I just said, okay, God, I'm here. But he was really trying to get my attention here. So I really believe he wants to move and do something powerful here today. And I'm hoping that that's what this is. Not just an education of the head, but as well as an education of the heart too as well. Without both, it's really not true education, okay? So we need to have information in the head, but as well as understanding things on a heart level and experience level. And so I felt the Lord saying to me today, and just to set up the lesson, it just again and again, he was saying to me, I'm coming back one day, and I'm going to judge the living and the dead. I'm going to judge everybody based on what they have done, but also the motives that they did things in. And so you very rarely hear that said, even though it's in the Nicene Creed, he will come back to judge the living and the dead. For whatever reason, I don't know why we don't hear that much in the church anymore, but the idea that God is coming back. And when I was a little kid, my mother told me this, that I don't know why she told me about the rapture and the end times and the Antichrist, but at 5 years old, I was thinking about how is this whole thing going to wrap up, and basically I'm sitting there and I'm picturing my whole life on this big movie screen, you know what I mean? And I'm like, oh my God, they're going to know that I did take that little toy gun that they gave me to school, because it's going to be up on that screen. And I was seeing that. I don't know if that's how it's going to be done, and I hope not, because, did a lot of stupid things, especially at school. But you know, the idea is he is coming back, and he's going to judge not only just the things we have done, but the motives of the heart, which are. And it says right here in Corinthians. It says, 1 Corinthians, the 4th chapter, verse 5, "Therefore, do not pronounce judgment before the time, before the Lord comes, who will bring to light things now hidden in darkness and disclose the purposes of the heart. Then each one will receive his condemnation from God." And so, first and foremost, and that's just going to lead into the idea that to go deeper, not only what am I doing, but why am I doing things? So in the chapter it starts off that as a leader, the most difficult task for leaders is to lead ourselves. Okay? And that's how it is. Like in the small responsibilities that I have in this church, I often catch myself in like a chaotic frenzy, and I'm like, wow, I gotta slow down. I've got to restart. I don't want to be running around like a chicken without my head on. And it's tough to really lead ourselves. Why is this? Because the truth is, it's like to take a deep look into ourselves is not that easy, right? Who wants to take a look at the things about ourselves that aren't so, you know, glamorous? And so that's why it's a tough thing. And the quote here in the book that from Parker J. Palmer, "Everything in us cries out against it. This is why we externalize everything. It is far easier to deal with the exterior world. It is easier to spend your life manipulating an institution than dealing with your own soul. We make institutions complicated, hard, and rigorous, but they are simplicity." And so this idea is, it is so easy, even if I ever catch myself gossiping, which kind of sometimes runs in my family, I know what I did was, it's hard to live my own life, so it's a lot easier to talk about someone else's life, what they should be doing, right? How easy is that? It's hard to live my own life as a leader. And that's basically the sense of the chapter here. We're going to go into this concept of basically today that Pete is face your shadow. Okay? And so what is the shadow? Now this is a tricky concept, it's not easy, but your shadow is an accumulation of untamed emotions and thoughts that, while largely unconscious, strongly influence and shape your behaviors. It is the damaged but mostly hidden version of who you are. And so the shadow can show itself up in various forms. Okay, we're going to see a little later that shadow is just not another word for sin, because there are parts necessarily that aren't necessarily sinful. That you go a little deeper, and we'll give you some examples, but it can take on sinful behaviors. It can be outburst of anger. It could be jealousy, resentment, lust, greed, bitterness. Or it could be something as, like for instance, rescuing others that's not necessarily sinful. You're trying to do something helpful to someone. And the need for approval. Like we all have a healthy need for approval, but it can go and quickly become unhealthy. Or what I've seen in my family is being a workaholic. And people can easily chalk that off into, wow, he has strong work ethic. Okay, but there are aspects of the shadow that may be sinful. But others simply might be weaknesses or wounds. Okay? And so the shadow is just not another word for sin. It tends to show up in ways that we protect ourselves. A good illustration of this that he gives in the book is the idea of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the famous play, where this one person has two totally different sides to the personality. I know that I feel that way sometimes. Like being a table leader at EHS, I'm like, God, if they seen me at work this weekend, I was not emotionally healthy. I spiked that package on the floor because I'm in e-commerce, and I looked like an idiot. But what I do is constantly, now I just catch myself quicker. It's not that I don't blow it, but that I catch myself quicker. But we could all have two sides to the personality. And this idea that another side of us emerges within our closest relationships where we're not necessarily, don't have to necessarily be on our best behavior. My sisters are not going to stop ever being my sisters. So, you know, if I have to spike a package in front of them, you know what I mean, on the floor, because for some reason, so we have more liberty with the people that are closest to us. Okay? So there are two ways when we face the shadow. We're going to get into this today. There are two ways to face the shadow. And one of the ways being, A, I am totally bad, and I am a terrible sinner, and no good thing dwells inside of me. Romans 7. Or the heart is deceitful and wicked above all things you could know. And then we have B, I am totally good, a new creation in Christ, a saint who is fearfully and wonderfully made, 2 Corinthians Psalm 139. There are many in the Christian world that take this slant of view and say that we do not need inner healing simply for the fact is at the cross we were made new. Okay? Now, you know, I'm not saying that what they're saying is not, you know, I'm not going to comment on them, but what I can say for me is I see another side of me, that shadow side that's constantly popping up that needs that I have not totally been made a new creation, particularly in my soul region, okay? So we can take either one of these two extremes, but the real thing that we want to do is have a healthy perspective with both of these, okay? It's the same thing like a lot of people say, can you lose your salvation, you know? And there are people that say that you can never lose your salvation, and there are people that say that you can. And but scriptural, there are scripture verses that support both. So it's best to hold that in healthy tension. The same with this here as well. Like to hold this, yes, I am a new creation, but at the same time, God, there could be some things in my heart sometimes that pop up that I can be shocked about. But the good news here is that we all know this, right? Is that if we can face the dark parts of who we are, God is going with us. I had a mentor of mine that said, God will sometimes take you into deserts and periods in your life. It's Him working on you. It's Him forming you. And God is going to take you into the desert and He's going to take you out. Okay? But if God did not walk with you out of that desert, you probably wouldn't come out. Okay? So let's just take in mind that today that if God is causing us to walk and face the darker parts of who we are, He's with us. He's walking with us. He's right there. I like to picture Him either in my driver's seat in my car or walking with me holding hands as I'm getting into this place. This way I still have hope, right? Because it can get pretty morbid to go into introspection. So for Pete, in the book, basically, Jerry wants to go over the mission statement of EHS, and he basically just wants to get a quick approval from her. And basically, she starts saying, "Wait, slow down. I want to kind of, I want to think about this a little bit." And Pete is getting mad. He's turning red. He's becoming irate. He's like, and basically, she can see he's becoming visually just really upset. And Pete, what's going on inside of you? And really what it brought up was this idea that Jerry wasn't giving him a quick, basic, endorsement for this mission statement, that basically it was triggering him to early childhood, where there just wasn't much affirmation, where there wasn't much, wow, you're doing a good job, and basically how he got triggered. And Jerry said, let's just stop for a minute here, Pete. Look at what book you're writing. You're writing The Emotionally Healthy Leader right now. Let's stop. Let's take this moment. And they unpacked it. And they realized that in Pete's family as well as mine, and we often say this to each other, we have very similar backgrounds and very similar stories in many aspects. But that idea that there's anxiety and fear and impatience within the Italian culture. All right, so basically that idea, it was bringing out this simple question was bringing out the shadow side of him. But Pete, it also looked like he avoided the difficult conversations, right? Like, for instance, when we're saying good things to people, people are going to move towards us. We have to have difficult conversations with people. Like, at one time I had several employees, and you have to say, did you use mouthwash this morning? Because you're talking with other people, you know what I mean? Or, and mostly it was teenagers or college kids. And sometimes you had to have uncomfortable conversations with people. You were late 3 days in a row. What's going on? Can we talk about this or whatever? And immediately you see people change. And so Pete realized this, and he realized that it was all rooted in his approval. That basically this idea of when he had to have difficult conversations, and if you're a pastor, you think you don't have to have difficult conversations with people, but he was avoiding those conversations. He loved preaching and teaching and casting vision like most pastors, but he stayed away from administration, budgeting, hiring and firing, and detailed planning. Okay? So you see how quickly, easy, we could have the best preaching on Sunday. Okay? Have mind-blowing, we could have TD Jakes here every Sunday, or whatever, to bring the house down. But think about a church where there was no administration, budgeting, hiring, firing, or detailed planning. Okay? It would be a very shallow church. Okay? So Pete focused on what he did, what he really liked, and kind of stayed away from those things. Particularly having to let go of staff that weren't performing, that weren't doing their jobs. Okay? So that's what it looked like for Pete. This was a great quote that they had in the book. So this monk was talking, they were doing work one day, and the monk said, "John, your cup is full of poison." And John answered, "Yes, it is. But you said that when you only saw the outside of me. I wonder what you would say if you saw the inside." Okay? If we don't face our shadows, it will impact our ability to lead, and we will be blind to seeing others and the power that it has over us. And so if we don't face the shadow, this will impact the people that are underneath us, and it could impact our children. And so basically Lincoln, he shows in the book how Lincoln's dark side, and Lincoln had so many defeats. President Lincoln, he had nervous breakdowns and all this stuff, and political defeat after defeat after defeat, but how all of these things worked into shape him to rise up for America in one of the most tumultuous times in the Civil War. And this is one thing that I want to lead you with today, is that basically, it's not making its way to my last slide. That's okay. Okay. But I can give you the quote anyway. So, this happened to me, right? I was serving in ministry, was planning a church, and was really zealous for the Lord and doing several things, but I knew something was deeply wrong. I knew my discipleship, there was something wrong. Although I had a love for the Lord and all this stuff, there were other sides of me. And I kind of just kept kicking the can down the road, so to say. You know what I mean? And basically, it all blew up on me at several times. How many of you know that God He will bring a correction in your life because He loves you? And He'll let something and He'll let it hit the fan, so to say, and bring you to the point where you got your attention. Ray Lewis was a Super Bowl MVP, and someone accused him of murder, and he was sitting in the jail cell. He got arrested, and they accused him of double homicide, and he said, "I heard the Lord speak for the first time in my life." And he said, "Ray, can you hear me now? I was trying to get your attention for a long time. You can hear me clearly now." And we don't want to wait to that point. And this is what Pete says, and then Oscar's going to come up here. There are two options when it comes to the shadow. Either we could ignore it until we hit a wall, or where pain is so great that we have no choice but to face up to it, or we can be proactive, courageously looking at the factors that contributed to its formation. And so that's what I'm pleading with you, because for somebody that had to learn the hard way many times, please take the opportunity now to take a look at the shadow and really face some of the parts that you might really not want to face, because you don't want to wait until God has to get your attention in order to do that, because it can be pretty life-altering. So yeah, it seems counterproductive. I remember I went down to work with Angie Kaminsky, who is a disciple of Leanne Payne and John Wimber, and to go in to do some deep inner healing, and they basically pick your whole entire life and personality apart during this week, and they have counselors there. It's very intense. And basically this idea of like seems counterproductive, that if I face these things like, oh my God, it's going to kill me, but it led to the greatest freedom that I've ever had. And basically, actually, they uncovered something that week, which was the main motivation, and I won't tell it. I tell the full story in the cross-current class that I teach, but because it was sexual in nature. And basically, they were like, I want you to, you've got to confess this in front of everybody. And I'm like, what? I'm not doing that. There's 40 people here, and there's counselors and all this. I'm not doing that. And I go to my coach and say, hey, can we just do this session between me and you? And he just starts laughing. He's like, yeah, that's kind of not how it works there. No, you have to do it to the group. And I'm like, what? This is crazy. Why would I get up in front of a room and tell everybody the worst thing about me? The secret motivations, my hidden motivations. And but I tell you, it brought a lot of freedom. So the last session at IHD, Rick and Pam gave that teaching about doubt and unbelief. And so I wanted to share a little of my shadow and lead out of that, okay? And so basically I was just hit me like a ton of bricks. And when I really looked closely, I realized that I look at my circumstances a lot and doubt gets to me. You know, I realize unbelief has kept me grounded, and I'm thinking, is God really going to do what he said he's going to do in my life? And after that session, I walked out of there just with my head down, and God just was doing a deep work. And then I'm listening to this thing on bitter roots that I was listening to, and God's just bringing all this stuff up, and I'm like, God, what are you doing? He's revealing my shadow. Okay? He's wanting to deal with this doubt and unbelief in particularly, and like, okay, we got to get this on the operating table already. Let's do this. And so out of that session with Rick and Pam, I was walking around like in a daze the whole week, and then I ended up in the hospital because I think I worked out too hard because it was, because it was just an intense week for me. Another side of it is I worked in a family business. My grandmother worked till she was 90, and she claimed she never took a day off in her life. Okay, and right before she died, I said, come on, you never took a sick day or anything. She was swearing to the end, no, I didn't do it. And so in my family, if you don't work and work really hard, no, you don't get days off, you don't get holidays, you don't get birthdays. You're a jackhammer, baby. You know what I mean? We don't celebrate birthdays, we don't celebrate days off. You work. Right? And you work and work and work. And I took that into my adult life, and basically, it works very well for your employer, but it leaves you depleted because you work so hard. I worked with my father the last 10 years, and he got sick at the beginning of that. That's why I started working with him, and it really put a lot of strain on our relationship. And I find myself now, like, do I really want to put the effort to turn this around? Because it's going to take so much time and effort. We're going to have to see a counselor. Do I really want to do this? And because I'm doing so much church work, but I know God is saying, I want you to do this. You've got to fix this. Okay? And it's not going to happen from your father. You've got to initiate it. But I'm lazy. That's part of what my shadow looks like. I often act out inappropriate at work when under pressure, particularly yelling a lot. Okay? So, I did a lot of martial arts and a lot of sports, so when things don't get right, I can start yelling. And I catch myself and I'm like, oh my goodness. You're a table leader at Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. What is your staff thinking right now? I often do not pay attention to my hurt, and then it turns into anger. And love covers over a multitude of sins, but anger covers over a multitude of love really quick. So my anger can get out of control. My grandparents grew up during the Great Depression, and there was always, I didn't realize this, but a fear of lack, fear of not having enough, fear of the future. You got to be ultra super careful. My grandmother had the same pots for 50, 60 years, same stove, same everything. There was just, and they didn't do it on purpose, but there was just a deep fear and anxiety that ran through my family. And to this day, I have to consistently be aware of not letting the fear and anxiety take the wheel of my life. Another way the shadow shows up in my life, that basically I have low self-worth and shame. The enemy is just trying to throw dirt at me my whole entire life, even from when I was a little kid. And so basically I tried this performance mentality, thinking that if I perform better, people will love me more. But we all know that that doesn't work in God's kingdom. We can't earn it. How else my shadow looks like? I was exercising this week and I injured myself exercising. And the next day I was back to exercising again. And I felt like the Lord was saying, stop, stop, stop. There's something more going on here. It's nice to want to exercise. But is this an attempt to approve yourself so people will love you? And I'm sitting there going, wow. Or the Lord brought to my attention, Josh, sometimes you exaggerate when you're telling stories. And you're not necessarily lying, but it went from 100 people to 1,000 people with it. And it's really an attempt to get people to like you. And lastly, another side of my shadow. And thank God I found out Rob Reamer has this too as well, so it's making me feel good. Every now and then I like to have a nice cigar and have a nice fine cigar. And I was like, God, this habit isn't a great habit. Why am I doing this? And he goes, basically, it's an unhealthy way that you're self-soothing. You're trying to self-soothe. It's almost like an infant with a pacifier, like with this oral obsession. And I'm saying, oh, great. And so I just wanted to come up here and just share parts of my shadow. And
thank you, Josh. That's
Thank you. Can we, man, go and hug him?
Sure.
Come on, man.
Glad you as well, Josh.
Thank you. Appreciate her.
I'll give you a hug.
Let's do a group hug.
Thank you for being so bold. You're so big.
It's
I love you.
Thank you.